Okay, so I stop my video and continue with this contents of the lecture. So today we are talking about, as I mentioned, the theory of resilience, some examples, what it means, and then we are dealing with climate impacts in cities, which is a specific problem caused by climate change. And also I'm including to the lecture examples of practical situations and plans, how cities have reacted, what kind of programs and plans and strategies they have been developing, and then some examples of research projects in the end. So this photograph is actually from Japan, from the roof garden in the main railway station in Kyoto. So they are. This is more and more typical nowadays that in cities, also the roofs of the buildings are used for gardening and green surfaces. But first we start with this resilience. So what does it mean? It has become a kind of more and more common concept during last years. Before we were talking a lot about sustainability, and it's still a hot topic, one can say. But now resilience has also become more and more common in different contexts. And there are some background ideas about that. It has been stated that human dominion has become more and more stronger in society's interactions with nature since actually the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century. And then with the growing human dominance in the biosphere, nature has become more and more domesticated, as the researchers have expressed it. And Herbert Simon has stated that the world we live in today is much more a man-made or artificial world than it is a natural world. Of course, in general, you can say like this, but the situation is always place specific. So we still have very sparsely populated areas like Finland. And then we have very rapidly growing areas like thinking about the megacities in Asian countries, for example, and even isolated areas and uninhabited areas. But of course, you can state like this in general. Then I have been trying to figure out Lotta is asking that are we recording these lectures? Yes, we are recording them. So I should have started the recording. Just check that. Yes, recording is on, and you will also get the material of these slides will be in Moodle also. So I have been trying to figure out these kind of different mega trends and trends which are present in our life nowadays. Of course, urbanization is a very big phenomenon, still growing on, even though this COVID-19 has kind of set it in a different position. So that, for example, in Finland, we have noticed that more and more people have also been able to adopt this kind of multi-local way of living because of distance working has become possible due to COVID. And
sorry,
Yes, please.
Yeah. I just wonder, we're at slide 2.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah. Okay.
Did it change?
Well, I see the slide 2.
Aha.
Number 2.
Okay, it might be. You should.
Okay,
be...
now it changed. Yes.
Okay. Well, maybe I used. Well, what else? What else technical problem we can have this morning?
Oh,
Well,
we'll see. We'll see.
we'll see. Maybe there is some. Okay. At least we have some issues now working, which is very good. I keep going in this state. Okay, so I was talking about this COVID impact. So it made people realize that you can also live in different places and work in distance. Not possible for everybody, of course, but it created kind of more freedom to choose in this kind of very extraordinary situation. And so that, yes, of course, urbanization is growing, but there are maybe other phenomena also visible now. Digitalization has been one mega trend for a long time now, and that is affecting all our areas of life very strongly. And it seems that we just have to adapt. We cannot resist it also. Of course, it provides lots of positive things, but in some cases, it's not only a positive phenomenon. I've been thinking about elderly people who don't have access to digital tools or are not used to use them. So that causes a lot of trouble. Also, it causes kind of segregation in the society for those who don't have easy access to digital equipments. So that should have been taken also seriously in the society. Because of this COVID, we were strongly involved with a kind of globalization, and we still are. But when COVID started, you could see that there were also this kind of protectionism acts happening between states, and this feeling of insecurity was growing, so that everybody was thinking, or many people were thinking, not maybe everybody, but many people were thinking how to protect myself better in this situation. Climate change is, of course, has been a megatrend and recognized megatrend for a longer period also. And partly due to climate change also, this circular economy has been rising. So started maybe from the demand to deal with waste in a better way, and then started to grow to this kind of, we are talking about the change from linear thinking into circular thinking, so that how the material that is waste for us can be used again, and it can be a raw material to somebody else. So very shortly, we could talk about this 1 hour more, but this is a kind of framework for this lecture also. And so it has been criticized that this understanding about ecological knowledge has been concentrating not in the cities, so that it has been stated that we have inadequate or incorrect understanding of how nature works in science, and we have also had a misuse of ecological knowledge in action. And also, until recently, it was very common that biological populations and communities and ecosystems were understood as systems that we keep at a constant stable equilibrium, and so that also the mainstream ecology has been overlooking cities. Just during the recent decades, also ecology, kind of urban ecology, has been launched. And in Lahti, we have a good example because Helsinki University started this urban ecology research and education in Lahti. It was also in connection with Lake Vesijärvi, which was in a very bad state, environmental state, due to the wastewater from industry and the community running straight to the lake, unpurified. And so Lahti has provided a good environment for research and also different actions of improvement to the lake, which have been also successful. Okay, so there is maybe this is an interesting statement that you might easily think that pure nature is something which is in balance, but nature is not actually in balance, but it is in a constant or eternal flux, so that there is a transition going on in the nature. If we are thinking about what happens in ecosystems, that they start from some point and then they continue to develop the different stages, like a forest, for example. If there is a burnt area and the forest starts to grow, so there are different plants which come in different stages of the forest. And so that there has been this shift from the balance of nature to the kind of hierarchical batch dynamics paradigm. And there is some references to the researchers also claiming on this. So this was shortly what kind of problems have been identified, very shortly, I might say. But one answer to these questions is to introduce this resilience theory, so that it's an emerging body of ideas, principles, and knowledge for understanding, managing, and designing socio-ecological systems. There are different references to researchers. So that is why it can also provide a possible framework for the problems in ecosystems, and especially in urban ecosystems, but also natural ecosystems. So resilience, according to this resilience theory, cities are seen as socio-ecological systems. So not only ecological or not only sociological, but both of these. And so in this area, there is lots of interest to find out how to adopt this theory, what does it mean in practice, and how cities can be continuing in their strategies to adopt these principles. And here is one example of an organization which is collecting, it's working actually in Stockholm. And let me see if I can open the link. Is this website visible to you? It might be that the screen is not updated.
No, can't see it.
Can't. can see or can't see?
Can't.
Can't see. Okay. Well, I think you can go there and open it yourself. Take it from the slides. So there is an institute which is called this Resilience Alliance, and it is collecting information about resilience and public publications. So that is kind of source of theory and examples if you want to learn more through that organization. But maybe we don't take time to concentrate on that. It is just a kind of reference when you are, for example, making your courseworks, so you can use this website. But instead of that, we look shortly how this concept of resilience has been introduced. And as early as 1974, researcher Holling was describing this principle as a measure of the ability of systems to absorb change and disturbance without losing the pre-disturbance relationships between their constituent elements. So that he was calling this resilience and stability of ecological systems. Sounds a bit theoretical, but we go further on and find more examples about this. And it has been also stated that as with sustainability, resilience is also a concept which is not easy to be presented in quantitative terms. So that how you measure resilience or how you measure sustainability, of course, different researchers and organizations have been developing kind of tools to describe these phenomena, but sometimes, or you can, in a general way, you can say that it is really hard to give strict measurements to describe these phenomena. And then there is also this kind of organization, 100 Resilient Cities, which is collecting cities who have wanted to join the organization and actively develop their own strategy and management actions in a resilient way. And as we know that there is this prediction that about 70% of world's population will be living in cities by 2050. So the sustainability of cities is a key issue. And here is a map showing these resilient cities. And not many of them are actually joining in Nordic countries, but in Denmark there is a relatively small city which is part of this organization, and we will be also examining what kind of actions they have been doing. For example, I noticed that in United Kingdom there are, for example, Glasgow, Greater Manchester area, and London were member cities in this organization. But here are some measurements presented, how you can describe the resilience of the city. And of course, maybe not just one description is enough, but if you are able to compare different cities, you can see differences and evaluate them. Also, some other links. OECD is publishing all the time interesting publications, and they also have this. This is actually from OECD based figure, which is describing this resilience measurement, and interesting organizations which are supporting sustainability of cities are also this local governments for sustainability, ICLEI, and then C for the cities network of almost 100 megacities. So the biggest cities. Megacity is actually a city. It's defined in a way that if the city has more than 10 million inhabitants, it is a megacity. So that is one measurement how the urbanization is continuing in worldwide. That the amount of megacities is also increasing until 2050. But going back to this measurement of city resilience, so from the economical perspective, you can see GDP growth rate, unemployment, number of startups and business failures, and then age and gender of employed and working population in the city. They can be used as measurements. From social point of view, you can look at migration age and gender, poverty levels, household income, percentage of population living 500 meters from services. This is quite interesting tool. From environmental perspective, population density, of course, is crucial in the cities, and accessible green area level. Also, then the percentage of built-up areas and percentage of brownfield sites, and then percentage of citizens near open space, percentage of new development, and near transit locations are okay. I lost my connection for a while. Yeah. So I was talking about this environmental aspects in city resilience, and then the last one was the aspect of governance in cities. So there are suggestion of measurements like revenues by source and number of community organizations, public sector officials, and subnational governments. And then we continue to this example in Denmark. So it's a small city of Vejle, and which is part of this resilient cities. So it is a medium-sized Scandinavian city and municipality, and has 111,000 inhabitants, and the city itself has more than 50,000 citizens. So in scale, the municipality is quite similar like Lahti. And so they are claiming in their brochures that how small cities can solve big problems. That is their kind of slogan. And they have made their own resilience strategy. Here is the cover page, and you can find that in the net. Here is a general view to the city. So you can see that it is not a very high-rise city. Of course, when we have this kind of size of the city, looks quite green also, and quite attractive place to live in with this kind of human scale. But of course, all cities have problems, even though they look nice. And Vejle has a bit challenging situation because they are threatened by flooding from the nearby water, which is called the fjord. And so their concern is to protect their area during storms and rising water levels also. And that is a common problem to many cities situated in coastal areas. So what they want to do is that they try to act as a laboratory to improve water management by exploring innovative and integrated solutions. And they also want to retrofit new public spaces connected with this coastal area. And here is an example of a new development, which is called Fjordbyen. So that new area with new buildings and new public spaces is working as this kind of laboratory for climate change adaptation and flood control. And here are the risks. Risk of flooding, which is reduced by some measures like this design flood defenses to protect the area, and also connect this demonstration area with flood management with uses of recreational and community value, so that it also provides nice environment which people can use in their free time. And then one issue is to protect the areas which are behind this development, and so that there are integrated flood solutions along the road infrastructure to decrease the water flow. So this kind of problems are quite common with all coastal cities, and would be really interesting to know more about the technical solutions, but they are not in this publication. They are not presenting them in a more detailed level. But then something about this resilience in general. So for the resilience concept, there is this idea that some shock can be happening very quickly, and the community, the level of resilience in the community is demonstrated in a way that how quickly it can recover from these quick shocks. So the shock can be, for example, a major flood or a disease outbreak. But then, as a separate concept, there you can say that cities are also suffering from constant stress, so that which can be a kind of chronic condition, which is gradually weakening the city's fabric. And that kind of stresses can be, for example, high rates of unemployment or severe traffic congestions. And their analysis in Peile is that the stresses are more significant on a daily basis. They still see that they have relatively minor risk to face some major shocks. But that is, of course, the understanding doesn't say that shocks couldn't happen. There are possibilities for them also. So that's why they are in this resilience strategy. They are addressing in the first place to the stress factors in the city. Okay, that was about this city of Vejle in Denmark. It would be interesting to visit the city and see more about how they are managing. They also have listed in a detailed way many actions connected with climate resilience in the city, how they will support it in the future. So if you are interested to learn more about that city strategy, you can search for the publication and read it through. These are good examples, presenting many good examples. Well, city of Lahti, as a relatively small city, but also facing sometimes flood events, like in this photo from 2018 in the city center, where it has been realized for a long time ago that the amount of paved surfaces is very big. There are not there are green areas, but still lots of area which cannot infiltrate water, and so this kind of events can happen if there is a heavy rainfall. So the water is collected on the streets in certain parts of the city. There are challenges with stormwater management, especially in Lahti. Lahti is also situated on a lake coast, but that is not considered, the lake itself is not considered as a threat to the city, but more like the city is a threat to the lake, because of course nowadays there is this wastewater treatment in a good shape, but still there is a problem of the stormwater running unpurified into the lake. And the city has been dealing with these stormwater management issues. One of the key concepts in resilience is called adaptive management, so that through this kind of principle, the society can identify uncertainties and then establish methods to test some hypotheses concerning those uncertainties. And it can use management as a tool, not only to change the system, but as a tool to learn about the system also. So we cannot always say that this will be the right solution, but we also need more practical testing and learning about these new experiences. Like nature-based solutions has been introduced as one solution to solve the problems with stormwater management. And now many cities are testing these new kinds of solutions in the practical level and learning how they are functioning. And that is, of course, a long process when something new is taken into the use. Kind of old school designers and practitioners are usually suspicious towards it, and it takes a long time to make changes in the practices, how cities are solving these problems and building new areas. This is a photograph from Lahti, where they have built a stormwater treatment wetland, and this is connected with the residential area of Karisto in eastern side of the city. But there is the benefit that the city has been able to use a lot of land for this purpose, and that is not usually possible in central city areas. So there are different kind of solutions have to be adapted. And going back to these different kind of shocks which can happen in ecosystems. So other dramatic events can be wildfires, which are making destruction in a certain area, and anthropogenic intrusions can displace an ecosystem from its natural rhythm, and they can result in collapses that are significantly dramatic and possibly also irreversible. And that means that anthropogenic is referring to human impact, so that sometimes when cities are growing very big and densely, it's really hard to kind of reverse the development in very small actions, but the situations can be quite difficult. So here are still some definitions about cities as socio-ecological systems. So that, of course, they are really complex systems, and they have all kinds of heterogenic features considering space, time, and functions. So it's not very easy to say that what is correct way to act in cities, so that we are dealing with lots of uncertainties. And of course, in smaller cities, it's easier to adopt these new management ways. But if the city is very big and densely built, so the dramatic changes are quite difficult. And we can think about the forest as an example. So this fire accident was mentioned as one kind of shock, which can quickly expand. And it is called as a revolt in the ecosystem. And when we think about what happens after this kind of shock, so it takes a long time and slow process when the forest is renewing itself by drawing upon resources such as seed banks, which are in the soil, and returning organisms from broader scales. So these different stages are called, this quick shock is called a revolt, and then the slow recovering process is called remembering. So that the area, especially this natural ecosystem, can use its own resources to recover. And this metaphor in this theory of resilience is kind of transformed into the cities. So how cities act when some quick shock is happening, and how they are recovering slowly from this shock. And do they have the ability to recover? Because sometimes the city doesn't have much ability. These researchers, Sarifi and Yamagata, have been introducing this kind of division of urban resilience into different kind of elements. And you can see that this topic infrastructure is covering many critical elements in the cities, like water, energy, of course, is a very critical element, spatial configuration and location. So what kind of spatial structure the city has, how the transportation is managed in the city, what kind of green infrastructure the city has and what is the amount of it, what kind of defense structures for flooding, for example. Are there some sheltering structures in the city, so that in case of some urgent situation, have you been preparing for it by sheltering something? What kind of building and design is used in the city, and what kind of technological systems, information systems the city infrastructure is containing. So in many cases, this infrastructure is very critical for the management, for the adaptation abilities in the cities. And of course, city is also considered as an urban ecosystem. So how this urban ecosystem is functioning in a city, what kind of elements it's containing, and it's closely connected with this green infrastructure, of course. From the ecosystem, we can easily go to look this also very common concept nowadays, ecosystem services, because in later times there was not so much respect for green infrastructure in cities, or maybe the parks were considered as very carefully treated areas with lots of plantations, but as more aesthetic element. But then it became obvious that this green infrastructure is also a provider of different kind of services, which are called ecosystem services. And the character of different green areas is also important. That of course we still need this kind of very well-designed and managed park areas. They are usually connected with some public buildings or central areas, but we also need all kinds of more natural green areas in the cities, more and more natural elements to provide these services, and also they are important for health of people living in the cities. And this is one division. There are different kind of divisions presented in the research, but this is one of them quite commonly used, which is dividing these services into 4 different categories. So supporting services, provisioning services, regulating services, and cultural services. And these supporting services, they are the starting point in a way that if the ecosystem is working well, so it's providing possibilities of nutrient cycling in the area, it's supporting the soil formation and primary production. And this provisioning service is connected with food production, fresh water production, food and fiber production, and also fuel production. And regulating services are connected with climate regulation, because the impact of green infrastructure in cities is very, very important. It has roles to different roles, like the cooling effect, which we will be discussing the urban heat island. So the cooling effect is very important for that reason for the cities. Also, green areas are important in flood regulation and also stormwater management and disease regulation, because they also provide how do you say, they provide more loose areas, open areas to the city, in contradiction with the densely built residential areas. And they are also possible areas to purificate water. And the 4th one is these cultural services, which are connected with aesthetic and spiritual, educational, recreational purposes, all of them important also. And on the right, you see these different aspects of well-being, which they are connected, also these ecosystem services. And there is this security aspect, then basic material for good life, and health, which is more and more important nowadays. So that, for example, in Lahti, there was one interesting research made in kindergarten areas where basically children are playing in a gravel area, but then the researchers wanted to make an experiment, so they brought this ground layer from forest into the kindergarten courtyard. And then they were doing different kind of monitoring in laboratory tests from the children. And they noticed that there was a clear difference, that it was increasing the health of the children when they were able to be in close connection with these natural elements. Yes. And of course, the green infrastructure and ecosystem services also provide more freedom of choice and action for the residents in cities. And for many people, they are really crucial element in the environment. But then we go to look more closely about this urban climate and what are the main challenges in cities from climate perspective. So through different kind of measurements, it has been noticed that cities are more hot areas compared with their surroundings, unbuilt surroundings. So the heat in the cities is a problem. And of course, flooding by rivers and coastal areas is also a challenge. Cities have heavy rainfalls, and the rainfalls can also be heavier in the cities compared with the unbuilt surroundings. The amount of non-permeable surfaces, as you saw in the example from Lahti, is one problem. Also the quality and quantity of stormwater. Because the quantity, not only the quantity is the problem, but the quality, you can imagine that the stormwater in cities contains lots of impurities, and so it causes more harm to the watercourses if it's running straight into them. Usually restricted amount of green areas and vegetation is typical to cities. And the last is also pollution and emissions in cities by industrial activities, by traffic. This is a quite nice principle picture about Copenhagen's solutions for sustainable cities. So there are 4 adoption initiatives they had made, and here in the upper part of the picture there are some predictions about the urban climate in Copenhagen. It is expected to rise from 2 to 3 degrees by 2050, which is very much. Precipitation will increase by 30 or 40% by 2100. And the third point is that the seawater level around Copenhagen will also rise approximately 1 meter within the next 100 years. So there are lots of challenges for the city. And how they are answering, they are developing methods of draining water from big storms, which will be applied throughout the city. They are adding green areas, pocket parks, green roofs, green walls to slow down rainfall runoff and reduce the risk of flooding. For example, green roofs are able to collect rainwater and also make the running of rainwater slower into the surroundings. So that is actually the main reason why green roofs are effective in the cities. Their impact into the nutrients is a bit different, so that they can actually add nutrients in the stormwater, but their ability to work as part of the stormwater system is the main benefit. Then more buildings will use alternatives to air conditioning units, such as sunshades, improved ventilation and insulation. And safeguarding is the fourth aspect, so that safeguarding against flooding and rising sea level has to be realized also. So how the urban heat island is defined? So the urban heat island describes the surface temperature of the city measured a few meters above the ground, and reflect the fact that urban areas have higher air and surface temperatures than surrounding countryside. There are many hard and coated surfaces in the city, and particulates and gases in the air which are retaining the heat in the city. And the heat of the city can be determined by solar radiation, the heat generated by the city itself, and and how much of the incoming heat and heat generated by the city itself can leave the city again by evaporation, air movement, or radiation emission. And American Meteorological Society has stated in 2000 that the yearly average temperature of a large city may be 1 or 2 degrees higher than that of adjacent rural areas. And on calm, clear nights, urban agglomerates may be up to 12 degrees warmer than the nearby countryside. So you can imagine that the city is actually collecting the heat, and in this kind of situation, it's very important that you can create into the city more cooling areas and cooling elements, and also create a good ventilation to the cities, because sometimes also the lack of ventilation, so that the wind is not able to blow through the city, makes it also more hotter place. And this is especially typical to these kind of mega cities and very densely built cities, which hardly have any open areas. So here is also a picture about this urban heat island effect, how it is affecting the city area compared with the surrounding areas, so that there are, you can classify them like rural, suburban, industrial areas, urban residential, and then this typical downtown, so densely built high-rise buildings. And the temperature in daytime and nighttime it can be described like this based on measurements. So this is presenting the surface temperature and air temperature for different areas, and so the surface temperature around the 24-hour period fluctuates with the different surfaces, and is highest in urban areas. And the air temperature is relatively uniform over the 24-hour profile, while it falls at night outside the city, but remains high inside the city. And then here are shortly presented some possible climate actions in cities based on this Copenhagen strategy. Here is the harbor area. So green streets is one possibility, and that means street construction which contains green areas which are infiltrating stormwater from the street. And of course, you cannot just collect the stormwater, but you also have to have some pipelines leading the stormwater if there is lots of rain, so that you have to design these systems in a proper way that you are not causing extra problems by using them. Green roofs will be added, then green facades even. In more southern climates, they are possible. Finland is maybe a country which in the moment cannot have much use of green facades. There are some experiments, but they are more southern countries can use them for cooling, for example, and also treating for rainfall. Green urban spaces, of course, are very important, and also the design of streets and public areas can take into consideration that if there is a heavy rainfall, there should be also areas where the water can be collected in densely built cities. To lead it into different places, but these collection places can be also very important. Of course, the coastal areas, as it was mentioned, can be particularly vulnerable. Also drought will be a severe problem in Southern Europe, and I think it already is found because in some summer periods the temperatures in Southern European parts are growing into more than 40 degrees. So you can imagine that that kind of temperature is really intolerable and is causing lots of damage also to the ecosystem services. The rise of sea levels presents a global challenge. It threatens, especially in developing countries, major cities, and also in in developed countries, in both of them. The prediction is also that the sea level does not rise evenly around the globe. And of course, the coastline characteristics are influencing the consequences of sea level rising in a significant way. And then some examples, like a couple of years ago, I visited Dresden, which is situated next to River Elbe, very big river in Germany. And I went to a restaurant for a lunch, and then I noticed that there are some interesting marks in these columns, and noticed that they were marks of flooding, how high the flood had been in this restaurant during the two highest levels, and in the past 20 years. So that was a huge flood. We often see also this kind of, like last year, we saw this flooding event in southern Germany. So these kind of dramatic events and shocks, they are more and more common nowadays. In New York, they are also facing this threat of flooding, and they have a very magnificent plan for Seagate. And through this Seagate, they are trying to manage these dramatical flooding events threatening New York area. So that there is a prediction of what kind of flood heights above ground can be. These measurements are expressed as feet. So feet is about 30 centimeters, if I'm right. But also in Finland, here is an example for flooding in the city of Pori. So Pori is, of course, used to be covered by sea, the whole area in older periods, in ancient times. And nowadays, the landscape is very flat, and there is a river, and the sea shore is also quite near the city. So that is classified as one risk area in Finland. So the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry made a report about what are the significant flood risk areas in Finland, and they covered detected 21 areas, which and all these areas have prepared flood risk management plans too. So this common framework of flood risk management is based on EU floods directive, which is implemented also in Finland by national legislation. And Finnish Environment Institute has been responsible of this or participating this planning process too. So here is a map which is presenting these areas, and coastal districts in Helsinki and Espoo, also Loviisa, are in the southern coast. Then on the western coast there are places like Pori and the municipality of Huittinen, also center of Salo, which is not straight in a coastal area, but there is a river running through Salo. But then coastal districts of cities of Turku, Raisio, Naantali, and Rauma. Then also a center of Riihimäki, which is interesting, but that is also a very flat area and has a very high groundwater level in that area. It's a built area, but there is also a river running through the area. But that is an inland area, not connected with the coast. Then other coastal districts in in eastern or southern coast of Finland, but also in cities like Jyväskylä, which is situated in the central Finland, and many places in this western coast area which have big rivers and flooding in springtime also. But even in Lapland area, there are lots of places which in the city of Rovaniemi, which is here. There was about 5 years ago, I visited Rovaniemi, and they had quite high flood. There are these big rivers, Kemijoki and is it Torniojoki, which are connected in the city area, and the flood was really high. It was covering some road areas or even, excuse me. And then there are some indicators of these flood risk areas, like how many buildings, inhabitants, also cultural heritage sites, buildings difficult to evacuate. That is a good point in considering all kinds of threats, that if you come to a situation that you have to evacuate people, how easily you can do it. Traffic network, sites with potential damage of environment, so that there are lots of this kind of different places which are situated in these potential flood areas. Okay. I'm almost finishing my time, and I haven't used all my slides, but maybe I continue next time with the rest of the slides, but maybe some slides about the situation in Helsinki. Here is a figure showing scenarios for future medium sea level in Helsinki and Vaasa. Has been done by the Finnish Meteorological Institute. And Finnish Meteorological Institute provides lots of information also about these climate threats in Finland and different areas in Finland. So there are very different scenarios how much the level of the sea can rise. For example, in Helsinki, the highest scenario is more than 1 meter. And the lowest scenario is that it's only less than 20 centimeters. And in Vaasa, it's interesting that the scenarios are not so high, but I assume that this is because the land is still rising in this western coast due to the ice age impact. When the high layer of ice, several kilometers, was on the ground, so the impact of that ice is still causing this slow land rise in that area. But in Helsinki, it's interesting that Helsinki is building many new areas next to the sea, and also filling areas like in the Skalasatama area. So I got interested that how they have been figuring out this sea level rise possibilities, and was searching for information about it. So they have been considering the rise of sea level, and so they are telling that the streets are built 2.6 meters over the sea level, and the first floor of the building is approximately 3.5 meters over sea level. And so the forecast is that the level rises only once in 200 years to 2.3 meters over the normal sea level. And they have also been planning flood routes in the area to prepare for heavy rainfalls. So this is obviously what the cities have to do if they want to manage the situations in heavy rainfalls, and they want to construct densely built areas. Okay, but I think that I will stop here, and I think that Paul is online. So is it time for